Times Influence Initiative.
Hello and welcome to FCM Presents Redefining Corporate Travel Management. Corporate travel is a deeply fragmented space, on top of which corporate travel is one of the highest operational costs that most companies incur, which leads us to the question, what can make business travel more business friendly? Fortunately, to tackle this very topic, I'm joined by a panel of subject matter experts who include Rakshit Desai, Managing Director, FCM Travel Solutions. Jaideep Ghosh, Partner, COO, Head of Transport, Leisure and Sports, KPMG India. Sanjay Pai, Industry Expert and Head of Travel, Large Conglomerate. So gentlemen, let's kick off the conversation with some facts and figures. Global business travel spend is growing at a rate of upwards of 10% year on year. My first question, what slice of the pie does India comprise? And I'll start with you, Rakshit.
So, the global business travel market is growing at double digits, and I think that's fairly evident, and most of the data would support that. But if you look at India, travel penetration in India is pretty low. 20 million outbound trips last year on a base of 1.4 billion passengers. That's 1.5% international travel penetration. Even if you took total air travel penetration in India, it's 10% of the general population. It's on the cusp of breaking into the top 5 business travel markets in the world. So, it's a single-digit percentage share of the global market. But 15 years ago, it was negligible. Today, it's borderline significant. And in 10 or 15 years, you don't know, it might be dominant.
Well, that leads me to my next question, Jaideep, and that is, what are the nuances of the new age corporate traveler? And how have the dynamics of business travel evolved as a result?
Yeah, firstly, I think let me just add to what Rakshit did mention. So, just to sum that up, while globally the business travel would be expected to grow in the range of say 5 to 6% per annum for next 5 years, India definitely would grow at about 11 to 12%. So that means the growth is clearly going to happen.
Absolutely.
In terms of the new age corporate traveler, I think one basic theme what has changed is that the boundaries between the corporate travel and leisure travel has almost kind of blurred. The new age traveler needs those flexibility, needs that freedom, and also a simple interface. Specifically coming to India, given the our profile of very young population, it's the millennials, roughly speaking, people born in 1980s until early 1990s. Those are going to drive the business in future. So they are mostly tech savvy, very mobile savvy, and very keen to have new experiences, unique experiences, innovation, and so on and so forth.
Well, Dr. Pai, do you agree with that point of view, that the lines are blurring between corporate travel and leisure travel? And just to play devil's advocate for a moment, one way in which corporate travel is certainly different from leisure travel amongst the millennial generation is that for that generation, method of corporate travel seems to really be a reflection of their professional growth, their professional success. Your thoughts?
See, I agree with Jaideep. Earlier there was an embargation of MICE vis-a-vis the corporate travel. And corporate travel earlier didn't have any identity as such. Like what we have in aviation or business jets or business aviation doesn't have any differential with the commercial aviation. People are now moving to a globalization of digital platforms wherein they have started expecting many things which is used for both the MICE as well as the corporate travel. It is evolving very fast. Like Rakshit said, we have to be prepared for delivering whatever the expectations are from the traveler's perspective, from the corporate perspective, and people have to be ready from the technological platform, and the gaps are there for a person to fill in, wherein the TMCs and the corporate managers are trying their best to bring innovations in that field. It's no more a pure delivery of a ticket. It's basically fulfilling the expectations and the experience of the travelers.
One point you brought up was bridging the gaps, which I'd like to talk more about. Rakshit, what do you consider to be some of the leading loopholes in corporate travel management today? One overwhelming criticism of corporate travel management is that there is a lack of transparency. There isn't perhaps a strong conviction that it delivers business value. Your thoughts?
Look, I think, it depends on whether you start from a position of trust. All right. You typically, I think, when people talk about lack of transparency, it's with respect to whether your service partner is putting all of the information in front of you in order to enable you to make an informed purchase decision. Now, the travel ecosystem is so complex. Look at the different sources of content. You have air inventory, you have hotel inventory, you have cars, you have destination information, you have visas and passports, and so the question is, how much transparency can you put in front of a buyer without curating the experience? Sure. Right? So information overload is very possible, in which case you stand being accused of not curating or playing your role. On the other hand, if you do curate, there is, you always leave open the possibility of being, suspected of lack of transparency. But I think there are sufficient checks and balances out there today for people to independently verify what's right and what's wrong. And I think it's if you ask me, I think it's a hugely honest ecosystem, unless you're operating at the very fragmented end where, you always have exceptions to the norm and outliers.
Well, Jaydeep, how would you characterize the various players in this corporate travel ecosystem? And in your view, how can they better collaborate?
First, let's understand the market as such. In the entire, what can be classified as, business travel, not all are large corporates. In India, there are a significant number of, medium enterprises, if I may say. So today, about 90% of the market is not held by the established, corporate or what is called as TMC, travel management, companies. They only hold 10%. The established 90% is with, either the companies do it themselves, or it's through smaller, travel agencies. As long as the corporates see the TMCs as their partner and not like suppliers, vendors, the issues around transparency and loopholes around those could fast disappear. Of course, it's not only the corporate's responsibility; it has to be balanced. The TMCs also need to deliver, on the bottom line, as well as the other factors like safety or productivity, so on and so forth. One initiative which FCM, in association with KPMG, we've been doing, and this is the third year that we have come out with a industry white paper, which is on the trends of the corporate travel management and what are the factors, and then so on and so forth.
Dr. Pai, my next question is to you. Do you believe that larger players and smaller players alike need to seriously re-evaluate their existing corporate travel programs? And if so, what are the factors that they need to take into consideration?
As far as your transparency is concerned, let me revisit that. Whenever a corporate engages any TMCs, they are very clear in what they want, from whom they want. So the transparency is basically taken care of at that particular end. Then the question of a person who is a TMC, how he delivers, what he does, he's no more a vendor for us. It's a partnership basically. Whether it's a small organization or a big organization, the players are the same, the suppliers are the same, the contents are the same. So I feel the small organization now somewhere has to pull up their socks and get themselves organized to avail all these facilities in the future.
And Rakshit, when we talk about corporate travel management, I believe the elephant in the room is risk, whether it be financial risk, whether it be execution risk, safety risks, and the list really goes on. So what can corporate travel management programs do to better mitigate this risk, both in the mind of the decision makers and on ground, as far as the realities?
To my mind, there is a control risk, which is most companies that have comprehensive travel management needs have a high need for transparency, for information, and control over their programs, right? There's a broad spectrum of users out there. There are some very learned people that run very sophisticated programs and therefore don't have the same transparency concerns because their subject matter expertise is very high, sure. Right? And then you have some, you at the other end of the spectrum, you have people that don't understand the space very well, haven't immersed themselves, and therefore approach it with some degree of suspicion, for whom we are trying to improve the information space by publishing content that's relevant to them, as Jaydeep said, right? So I think that financial and operational control risk is largely taken care of by improving the information environment and solving for your information asymmetry out in the marketplace. The second bit is around regulatory risk, right? I think this is something that on the supply side or on the demand side, the industry hasn't fully understood yet. And for me, there are some interesting conundrums that are presented by things like GDPR and our own data protection regulation that's imminent, that in many ways will be more stringent than international standards.
Welcome back to our special feature, FCM Presents Redefining Corporate Travel Management. Well, Dr. Pai, from your experience, who is the leading decision maker from within the company that is offering their employers flexibility, simplicity, choice, better integrating their needs and wants into the corporate travel program?
See, it depends on corporate to corporate. I'll tell you, the safety was never taken into consideration as far as Indian corporates are concerned earlier. But now, looking at the Fortune 500 companies, people have started taking that as a prime this thing, and people are engaging themselves in various exercise of SOS and emergency centers and all these things. See, here geographically and the way you perform on your business, it depends on what type of businesses are you in. If it is an IT, if you're in oil and gas businesses, so it requires a lot of reikis to be done, lot of things to be done, homework to be done before sending your employees across. Otherwise, earlier it was the ATP, average ticket price, what falls into the kitty, because all this comes out with a cost, of course. So the cost adds into your ticket cost, or whatever you can call it as. So now people are aware that thanks to the technological platform, the turnaround time in travel is very important, because something which is wanting now can be purged little later, which can't be in use. So technology is playing a very important role here, because things like what is said, earlier it was a B2B or a B2C, B2B being a corporate travel, B2C being a leisure travel or whatever. Now it's gone beyond, it's B2D and B2E. Now, if you ask me what is B2D, I'll tell you it is the dynamism of process. If you ask me what is E is expectations and then experiencing it. So people are going further down from whatever was the earlier way of evaluating things and the deliveries. It's the TMC which understands, because they go across various corporates, they know the nerves, what is expected from them. So the deliveries are accordingly molded, Of course, safety is one aspect. Other than that, there is wow factor, there is services. Satisfaction doesn't have a definition, so it can go beyond things.
Endless.
So things have been taken care of, and based on the corporates, they do a balancing act. So whatever is expected, the deliveries are maintained accordingly.
Well, Rakshit, India is on the cusp of reaping a rich demographic dividend. So my question to you is, does that uniquely position the Indian workforce to help drive the adoption of travel-friendly tools and technologies like no other country or geography?
Yeah, it's not just a demographic dividend, right? It's also a dividend of deregulation, which is it was a market where you effectively took products to market and the market didn't have choice, right? Now you've got a different sort of demographic coming through. They don't like to be told what to do. They vote with their feet. If you don't have a great travel program, they resign and leave, right? If you can't offer them flexibility, they quit overnight. And conversely, they'll take pay cuts to come and work in environments where they feel they have the flexibility, they have some degree of social connect, and they can do whatever they wish to do. So I think it's a very interesting stage in the evolution of this market, where models that have historically been sort of crafted from the supply side are now getting shaped from the demand side. So users are now voicing their views, voting with their feet, voting with their wallets, and saying, look, this bit of the service works for me, this bit of the service doesn't. So it is demographically, we've got a market that's going to accept new forms of distribution, new sources of content, new ideas with which to put together solutions, and a lot of the historic sort of limitations will not apply. But equally, I think from a market evolution point of view, I think we've got, from the supply side, we have things coming through now. You've got cheap capital chasing, ideas. You've got people thinking up new models, business models in their garages, and it's all happening here right now.
Jaideep, we've talked a fair amount about the various players in the corporate travel ecosystem, and my question is, are there appropriate benchmarks in place to evaluate their performance?
I think there's some work which needs to be done, at least in the Indian context. Firstly, as I said, only 10% of the market thereabouts is an established, regulated sector. Rest of it is not. Other point is about 70 to 80% of Indian, if I may say so, corporates, their annual travel spend is not even more than 1 or 2 crore rupees. So I think the focus and attention hence is a little bit low. But there are industries, for instance, BPO or IT enabled, where travel related expenses is upwards of 2.5–3% of their revenues. And so I think there are certain benchmarks. I would think that somehow till now the large corporates often go by the cost as the primary parameter, then perhaps safety and transparency, and then employee productivity in some sort of order. But cost is something which still drives. Often probably overlooking that it's not only the price of a ticket or a night of stay which is important, but there are either back-end costs and front-end costs, and of course there is an entire cost associated with violating any regulatory policy, compliance costs, which doesn't often appear unless it happens. Those have huge penalties, up to 4% of your global turnovers. In that context, the benchmark needs to be far more holistic, and I think that's an area, in my opinion, the Indian corporates need to do a lot of work there.
Look, and to be honest with you, I think we have ourselves to blame there as well, right? Because there was always a section of the market. So advice is available. Sure. You can source it, right? And there was always a section of the market that knew what needed to be done, that was aware of international developments, that had the capability to customize and make it relevant in an Indian sort of marketplace. I think if the rest of the market doesn't follow, we shouldn't look around and try and figure out why that is. As a player in the ecosystem, we feel very strongly about our sense of responsibility that says, look, let's learn from our international players. Let's try and figure out what the local market's telling us in terms of user experience and regulatory demands. Let's try and pull together benchmarks that make sense here, and let's voluntarily try and adhere to them, even if the customer does not particularly enforce it on you contractually, or for that matter isn't even aware of that he deserves the expectation of a certain service standard, right? So I think it's really up to us, and the people that are embracing that and going and constantly tweaking them and raising the bar themselves. I think those are the people that are starting to help consolidate this hugely fragmented marketplace, and the others will get left out, and that's just evolution.
Well, speaking of what the customer deserves, I know that FCM Travel Solutions has collaborated with KPMG on this in-depth white paper, Redefining Corporate Travel Management, making the case that corporate travel needs to be more value-driven. But in that equation, how do we strike the balance and still ensure it's cost-effective?
Look, I think the first thing we need to do is we need to elevate the conversation, all right? I think there are too many CEOs and CFOs in India Inc. that don't pay sufficient attention to this. It's a strategic lever for the company. If you talk about the services economy in India and the growth of the services sector in India, in the services sector, what you have, you have people, infrastructure, travel. It's your third largest cost bucket, full stop. So from a cost point of view, it's certainly sensitive enough for you to want to look at it. From a risk point of view, these are your people, your ideas, your talent. This is the future of where your business is headed, and their self-being, their comfort levels, and their and their personal safety is something that that you need to pay sufficient attention to. So for me, the first thing I would do is I would tell leaders, directors, board members in corporate environments to pay more attention to what I think is an underappreciated and potentially certainly less well understood area that's of strategic importance to them.
And gentlemen, by way of closing comments, if I can have each of you in a single sentence describe to me what you believe the future of corporate travel looks like. Dr. Pai, we'll start with you.
The future of corporate travel, I think so, the speed what it has taken place, I think it's a proper thing like what Rakshit said and what Jaideep said. Some small corporates have 1 crore, 2 crore, there's no point for them to buy a machine gun to kill a fly, you know. So they have to go step by step. So there are many huge corporates or MNCs which have global offices which are having offices in India as well. So they are patronizing whatever has been followed in global. So Indian corporates, to be very frank, they don't easily accept what is already given to them in the platter. They want to tweak it, modernize it, and customize it in the Indian way of it's the betterment of the way they handle. So that is where the challenge is. So the twigging, the redevelopment, the requirements, the scope requirement as per the Indian corporate has been done, and the integration happens that way. So I think so corporate travel, to be very frank, the future will be on a digital platform. The expectations can be measured, the services can be measured, and the reviews happens automatically based on that parameters.
Jaideep, offer us a glimpse. What does the future of corporate travel look like in your view?
So I think, you know, India along with China and Indonesia will be the largest corporate market together, expected to in 2035. It's high growth market. So the travel management companies, I would expect them to do pretty well, provided they keep, you know, the focus on the traveler, their experience, their productivity, while, you know, complying with the policy framework of the corporates. So that's my closing comment.
Rakshit, the future of corporate travel in India and elsewhere, your predictions?
Look, in my view, I think players in the ecosystem that vigorously pursue taking friction out of the end-to-end travel experience, that use a combination of technological capabilities and human intelligence to deliver solutions that are relevant to individual users of the travel service, I think those are the people that will make a dent in the universe.
Thank you, gentlemen, for those groundbreaking takeaways. And that brings our special feature, FCM Presents Redefining Corporate Travel Management, to a close. Thanks for watching.
Pharma itself is an industry where the spend on corporate travel is very high. Managing a 4,000 people's travel within the country and abroad is not always very easy. Number two, as an industry, there are a lot of the seminars and so on and so forth generally happens nationally and internationally. So still the demand is nascent in terms of an overall development of the travel policies, but technically speaking, there are demands in terms of flexibility, both operational, the time lags or the preferences of airlines, preference of the hotels. So the negotiating power probably of the people and the companies are different. To me, that new age business people, the employees, will be probably the future of a different way of travel management when it comes to a very discerning demand, which is of two nature. Number one, it's of flexibility. Number two, supported by technology. In case these are two not there, I think it will be very difficult for any organization to maintain a healthy employee relationship. This corporate travel per se has not changed majorly in an Indian context till the time the pharma companies from this country has started moving into the rest of the world market or emerging markets. So those exports and those gradual development actually demanded a different kind of a travel plan that an industry must take care. And this is a lot of demanding because this is not only a developed nation that where you need to travel. You need to travel to places which are maybe a moderate in terms of overall flexibility and facilities. So as an industry, it's critical, and it's important that we look into a different overall strategic planning in the corporate travel management.
So first and foremost is safety, which is of paramount importance across the Welspun Group. The second one is efficiency, and by efficiency what I really mean is the entire travel solution has to be cost efficient and has to be something which is of ease, convenience and comfort. That's the second bit. And the third one is the entire integration so far as the system is concerned. That's again the convenience part of it, but how does one really enter into a travel solution, get the expense claim done, and ensure that the entire ease of doing things is also there at a single click. I think these are the three features that we look for in the travel solution. The new gen is adapting to a high tech, an efficient structure, and they possibly logging it from anywhere, so it's absolutely flexible. So they are 24/7 connected with work and travel as it seeks. There's definitely a lot of convenience with respect to the overall telepresence and all of that coming into play. So virtual and digital is also coming into play. So one does find some amount of unwanted travel that's really brought down. So the convenience of Connect is bringing down some amount of corporate travel. But having said this, I think culturally one does need to connect with all your multi-locations as a workplace. So I don't see the overall travel spend coming down dramatically, but I would put the entire growth at about 10 to 15% kind of a growth rate that I see in the near future.